Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Before we start with our today's analysis, a quick gentle reminder. BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS is running one of the initiatives called as the Knowledge Series on our YouTube channel. This will basically discuss the static part of the UPSC syllabus, and as part of this initiative, to give you further boost to your preparation, the following classes will be discussed in the near future. One is to do with right to equality, Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, partition of Bengal and Swadeshi movement, El Nino and La Nina, Indra Savni case, Lokpal, police reforms, Montreal Protocol, which are very important from the civil services examination point of view. So please do tune in live on our YouTube channel at 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. every single day to understand what these concepts are. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says China's interventions in the Horn of Africa. Let us try and understand what is this article all about. The article here is looking into two important aspects. One is the investments that is made by China in terms of the infrastructure. The other, it also looks into the larger area of not only the investments made by China but also its intervention when it comes to the security of Africa. So this article basically speaks about China and Africa's relationship, and we will also take a look at how India holds an advantageous position, but at the same time it also has to make investments and will also have to be cautious with respect to its affairs in Africa. Let us understand what is this article all about. When it comes to the modern political and economic relationship between mainland China as well as the African continent, when did it start? It started after the independence of the China. China had a civil war within China, after which you had Mao Zedong who took up the governance in China. Immediately after Mao Zedong took up the governance in China, from then what they have is an established relationship between mainland China as well as Africa. Trade between China and Africa increased by about 700% by the year 1990, and China happens to be the largest trading partner when it comes to Africa. When you consider some of the colonial powers, you had the French, you had the Germans, you also have United States of America who are able to interact with Africa, but at the same time all that they are having interaction is in terms of the military supply. But when it comes to China, China is present in Africa in every nook and corner. When you speak about African daily lives where they're using the mobile phones, whether it is televisions, whether it is the road, it is the Chinese who have made massive investment when it comes to Africa. So on one side, when it comes to the Western powers, they have limited scope in Africa because the investment is not so much. But when it comes to China, its presence is felt in all nook and corner. African governments have also willingly accepted loans from China because they are not expected to be accountable as well. When it comes to countries like United States of America, or if countries are also asking money from the International Monetary Fund, what is the country expected to do? It has to bring some changes in the way its operations work. The government has to bring some austerity measures as well. The government has to bring massive changes in the fiscal structure as well. But when it is asking loans from China, all these parameters need not have to be followed. The governments need not have to be accountable to China. So it is easy to accept loans from China rather than the Western countries. It is in this particular backdrop China has been investing across African continent throughout the last decade. They have not only invested right now, they are also planning to intervene on the security front as well. While the emphasis has been on the investments and raw materials in the past few decades, it took a new turn with the first China Horn of Africa Peace, Governance and Development Conference. Beijing's first special envoy to the region said that this is the first time China aims to play a role in the area of security. So not only have they invested in infrastructure, now they are planning to enter a new domain of taking care of the security of larger parts of Africa. When you look into the past projects, what has China focused on? China has focused on three important parameters. One, it has a forum to establish and connect to Africa called as the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, and during the pandemic as well, it increased its vaccine diplomacy, and China has come up with 2035 vision for China-Africa cooperation. What is this Forum on China-Africa Cooperation? As the very name denotes, you require all these countries to meet the Chinese officials. They have to discuss what their problems are, and if they are seeking for the infrastructural support or for the investment, what you require is a platform. So most countries of Africa come on this platform. They interact with China so that their officials know what is that all these countries from Africa are requesting from China. So the FOCAC promotes China's role in the infrastructural and societal development of the Horn. In 2021 forum, the entire region of Horn participated and four resolutions were adopted. What are those? The Dakar Action Plan, the China-Africa Cooperation Vision of 2035, the Sino-African Declaration on Climate Change, and declaration of the 8th Ministerial Conference of FOCAC. So basically, if all these countries want to uniformly come up together and want to put out one or two ideas to the Chinese officials on this platform discuss, negotiate, deliberate to ultimately come up with a consensus and immediately invest it on the larger continent. The second is to do with the vaccine diplomacy. What is this vaccine diplomacy? We have discussed in the past as well. When it came to COVID-19, what happened? Major countries, almost all countries started suffering because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And during this period, Africa is not industrially advanced. It does not have much of resources. One of the countries which assisted Africa during this period happened to be China. During the COVID-19 pandemic, China donated over 3 lakh vaccines to Ethiopia and Uganda, about 2 lakh vaccines to Kenya and Somalia. Sudan and Eritrea also benefited from China's vaccine diplomacy as well. Then Beijing is also initiated 2035 vision for China-Africa cooperation. It aims to transform the health sector, alleviate poverty, promote trade and investment, and expand digital innovation. The vision also focuses on green development, capacity building, improving people to people exchanges, and facilitating peace and security in the continent. Added to it, it is also working on four important interest or investment areas. One is in terms of the infrastructural project. Second is it is providing financial assistance to the countries in Africa. Third is in terms of extracting the natural resources. We know for the fact that Africa has a lot of natural resources, but they do not have the technology. But that technology is being transferred by China. And the last is to take care of the maritime interests of China as well as Africa. The first important factor that we have to discuss is in terms of the infrastructural projects. How has China made use or provided infrastructure to the Africa? Looking at the Chinese investments in infrastructure, one of its landmark projects was fully funding $200 billion African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa. So they have to convince the country that we are influencing you, we are helping you, we are helping you to build your infrastructure. So it has built the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa. It has also made significant investments in railways. It is building Addis Djibouti railway line connecting the landlocked country with the Eritrean ports in the Red Sea. China has also invested in Mombasa Nairobi railway in Kenya and has already delivered a railway project in Sudan. It has also viable military hardware market in Ethiopia. It has built over 80 infrastructural projects in Somalia, including hospitals, roads, schools and stadiums. And in Djibouti, 14 infrastructural projects are funded by China. What about the financial assistance? With respect to the financial assistance, Ethiopia is one of the top 5 recipients of the Chinese investments and also has a debt of about $14 billion. China accounts for 67% of Kenya's bilateral debt. In 2022, China promised to provide $15.7 million assistance to Eritrea. This is the financial assistance that is being provided by China to all these countries. The third major Chinese interest in Africa is the presence of natural resources, which is oil and coal. As we discussed, there are a lot number of natural resources, but Africa does not have the tools and technology and the equipments to extract it. So indirectly, this is also being provided by China. Beijing has invested 400 million in Mombasa's oil terminal. China is also interested in extracting multiple other minerals like gold, iron ore, precious stones, chemicals, oil and natural gas in Ethiopia. South Sudan, which happens to be a source of petroleum products, has had continued Beijing investment in the industry since the latter's initial entry in the year 1995. The fourth area is in reference to the maritime interest. What do we mean by maritime interest? If you take into picture Africa, what exactly happens? You have countries in the north like the Djibouti, which is present on the northeast part. Then you also have other countries which are also aspiring to provide their ports to the China so that China can make investments in these ports, and at the same time it is providing access to the Chinese naval vessels. China's first and only military base outside its mainland happens to be Djibouti. During his visit in early 2022, Wang hinted at China's willingness to develop Eritrea's coast, which would connect to China's investments in landlocked Ethiopia, and the US has also speculated that China wishes to build another military base in Kenya and Tanzania, thereby increasing its military presence in the region. So, on one side, it is making large scale infrastructural investments, it is providing financial assistance, it is providing assistance on the natural resources front where countries are able to explore and extract minerals, and finally, it is also making investments on the maritime front as well. So, in case of any eventuality, they are able to safeguard, and in case there are naval vessels of China which is heading towards this region, or there are other ships, they can also fuel in this particular place as well. These are some of the investments that have been made by China. Are all countries accepting it? Are they happy about the Chinese presence and the influence in Africa? If you look into the statistics, when conflict broke out in Tigray in November 2020, Addis Ababa appreciated Beijing for respecting Ethiopia's sovereignty. In December 2021, Kenya defended Chinese projects in the country. In November 2021, Uganda's president suggested that China give more access to its market similar to that of US or Europe, and similarly in May 2022, the East African Community Secretary General said that EAC would welcome Chinese investors to work in East Africa for the prosperity of the people. So yes, to a minimal extent, these countries are also accepting the investments that is made by China, but they also have concerns associated with the way of operations of China. What are these concerns? Criticism of China's economic engagement with Africa has been growing from labor unions and civil society on the poor labor conditions, unsustainable environmental practices, job displacement caused by the Chinese enterprises. China is also thought to be taking advantage of African government weaknesses, thereby encouraging corruption and wasteful decision making. Angola, Ghana, Gambia, Kenya have seen demonstrations against Chinese funded projects. In Democratic Republic of Congo, public concern is growing about the loans with few strings attached being used to money launder for projects that are never built, and there have been ghost projects in Nigeria as well. So what are the growing concerns in Africa with respect to China? This is where India has an advantage with respect to China. What is India's advantage, which also happens to be China's problem? When it comes to India, what has India done? India is able to invest large amount of money, and whenever India has invested in Africa, it has made sure that its focus is on increasing the competencies of the lower people. On one side, when you look at China, it is not about increasing the competencies of people in African continent, but it is more about market capture. But what is India doing? India is investing, it is also building infrastructure projects, it is also helping them as well, but it is more in terms of improvising the competencies of human resource development, information technology, maritime security, education and healthcare. While China is more about building the infrastructure like roads and so on, India is building the social infrastructure and increasing the competencies as well. Whenever the Chinese are present in a particular area, if they are engaging in the infrastructural projects, what do? They get their own people to that particular area, and they also are working in that infrastructure project, whether it is in Pakistan CPEG project, or it is in Sri Lanka, or it is in any country for that matter. What does China do? It does not trust the local people. Instead, whenever a project is being executed, it gets its own set of people. As a result, the local people do not get any skill set, they do not get any training whatsoever. This also becomes a problematic area for China. An advantage for India is whenever India operates a project, it does enhance the skill set of the local people, and which is why the local people are more in inclination towards India. When you speak about India, what has India done? India has been able to facilitate local participation and development, but that is not the same when it comes to China. Added to it, when you speak about India, Africa, we have the political relationship. Most of the African countries do aspire to become democracy. They also take inspiration from India. They might like the investments from China, but they do not like the communist model that is present in China. Added to it, when we speak about India, we are multicultural. Africa also has multiple cultures as well. Added to it, we also have English where we would be able to conversate with them. This is not the same with respect to China. These are the advantages for India. However, India also has to be careful as well. As of now, China was only investing in Africa. Countries were able to get some financial support as well. Now, what is China doing? It is also interfering or making an intervention in terms of the security. So, going forward, China is planning to become a global power. It is going to get an international status as well. Chinese presence is an alternative to the European powers. So while China is increasing its influence in Africa, India should also keep a constant eye on Africa and at the same time should interact more because we require Africa, Africa requires India, and this relationship has to continue in the near future. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says bring the shine back on government jobs. The article here is speaking about the concerns that are associated with the operations of the government. When you look into the government operations of late, what is happening? There is excessive privatization where people once upon a time were looking up to the government jobs, but these days we do not have much of the government jobs. Even if there are government jobs, these are not permanent in nature. They are contractual jobs, and at the same time there are large scale vacancies as well, which is where people are not able to understand why is there an issue with the government. So the author goes on to say that in the near future what we have to do is decrease this disparity and ensure that more jobs are created by the government and less contractual employees should be appointed by the government, is what is this article all about. Let's look into the statistics. According to the National Crime Record Bureau, in 2019 an Indian citizen died of suicide every hour due to joblessness, poverty, or bankruptcy. About 25,000 Indians died of suicide between 2018 and 20, said the union government in the Rajya Sabha. So this basically means that you have number of people who are passing away, killing themselves because they are in the face of poverty. They do not have the food to eat. They are unemployed, and as a result, if you look at the agitations that are happening in India, railway coaches are burnt because there have been flaws in the railway recruitment process, and at the same time India also saw protests over the Agnipath scheme as well. Why are people protesting? That is because they are not getting the jobs, and if they don't get the jobs they would not be able to take care of themselves, they'll not be able to take care of their family. Ultimately it is they who would be the sufferers. So the article here goes on to say the primary issue that we have in the country right now is to do with joblessness. When we speak about the private sector, what we have is the hire and the fire protocol. If they do not work properly, they will be fired, and if the company is not working out properly, they are not able to generate profits as well. Even in the private sector, what we have is the hire and the fire policy. The same is also being implemented by the government, says the author. In May 2022, Haryana terminated the services of over 2,000 contractual health workers who had been hired during the pandemic. In Delhi, hundreds of nurses, paramedical staff, lab technicians, and other contractual workers have been terminated by Ram Manohar Loya Hospital, Lady Hardinge Medical College, and others. Additionally, over 8,300 panchayat and rural development contractual staff in Assam state protest in February 2022. 2022. Why? Because they felt that they were working in the state as a contractual employees. They have worked for more than 12 to 14 years and they were not being given any kind of bonuses, allowances, pension or pay revisions. So this article goes on to say that we have two major issues in the government. One is to do with the vacancies, where these vacancies are not being filled by the government of the respective states and the government of India. And at the same time, the second issue is more to do with the contractual work. Let's look into the first issue. What is it? It is about vacancies. What are these vacancies? There is a job that needs to be filled in. It can be group C, it can be group D, it can be group A or group B. But in this particular position, the government is not issuing a notification for filling up this vacancy. This is the major problem. There were about 60 lakh vacancies in the government across all levels in July 2021. Of these, only 9.1 lakh were in the central government, while about 2 lakh vacancies were in the PSU banks. Additionally, there were over 5.3 lakh vacancies in the state police. While primary schools were estimated to have about 8.3 lakh vacancies, the government has sought to push for recruitment of 10 lakh people in a mission mode over 1.5 years. But this is not enough, says the author. While we have 60 lakh vacancies all over India, what we are fulfilling right now is just about 10 lakh people. So this is not enough, says the author. Added to it, if we are speaking about the contractual workers, in 2014, about 43% of the government employees had non-permanent or contractual jobs, with about 6.9 million working in the key flagship welfare programs and little, if any, social security cover, as per the Indian Staffing Industry Research report. So they do not have any of the social security schemes and measures for these contractual workers. By 2018, the share of the government employees in this contractual employee segment was about 59%. From 43%, it has taken a jump to about 59%. For central public sector enterprises, the share of contractual employees increased from 19% to 37%, with permanent employees dropping in share by about 25%. ONGC had contractual employees form over 81% of its staff in March 2020. In fact, the Supreme Court of India has also said that contractual employee for a government department is not a government servant, so they may not get all the pension and other facilities that are provided to the government servant. So what is the way forward? What is the recommendation given by the author? The author in this particular backdrop goes on to say that we should seek to bolster the public services. When COVID-19 hit the country, we did not have the required infrastructure. So going forward, similarly, if there are many other social infrastructure areas like the health or the education or any area where the government is active and needs to invest, all these areas, infrastructural development has to be taking place. So when infrastructure development takes place, what you will also add is people to these all social infrastructure areas. Thereby, on one side, we are increasing the social infrastructure, building the physical infrastructure, and when this is built, we are also recruiting people to fulfill the obligations of the government. So which are the areas that currently have positions apart from the government? We can consider the renewable power generation. This is a significant potential for job creation. For example, in rooftop solar power generation, manufacturing of solar panel modules, and end-use servicing. Meanwhile, on the waste management front, there is significant scope for expanding the wastewater treatment capacity with the building and management of treatment plants for severe waste and fecal sludge treatment plants, leading to the generation of jobs. A push for adopting electric vehicles and encouraging green mobility. When such areas are developed, more jobs will be created and these jobs will be taken care by the people, and ultimately the joblessness will reduce over a period of time. Then we have to encourage urban farming with significant job potential in permaculture, gardening and nurse management. Perhaps Another area of selective PSU reform should also be considered. A PSU with greater autonomy, with government retaining control via a holding firm, can also be subject to the right incentives as well. So the author goes on to say, if we are able to bring another round of PSU reforms, if we are able to appoint right kind of people, it is not about downsizing of the government personnel, it is about right sizing. What do we mean by right sizing? It is not, it is about optimum number of people required for that particular service. It is not about too many people, it is not about too less number of people, it is about having right number of people, right personnel for the right kind of job. So instead of downsizing it, what we have to do is right sizing, and at the same time civil servants will have to take up key designations. They have to eventually increase the trust of the public over a period of time. These vacancies will have to be reduced and contractual employees will also have to reduce, says the author. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says a problematic provision. Let us try and understand what is this article all about. We have many states in India which have the legislative councils. As part of the assignment, you have to put on the comment section which states in India have the legislative councils. When it comes to the legislative councils, you also have the members of legislative assembly who also vote for the members of the legislative council. So if a member of legislative council has to be elected, you also have the members of legislative assembly who have a quota of their own where they would be able to vote in this seat of the legislative council. But here is a problem. Recently, we had the legislative council elections in the state of Maharashtra. But two of the MLAs, Nawab Malik and Anil Deshmukh, are in prison. This is in connection to the money laundering offences, and as a result, they approach the court of law. What do they say to the court of law? We, as the designated MLAs for a particular constituency, have the power to vote in the legislative council elections. So they appealed before the courts. So what we have is the special judge under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act who rejected this prayer, and at the same time the Bombay High Court did not pay heed to their request, and we also have the Supreme Court which rejected their prayer. This basically goes on to say that if there are MLAs or if there are people who are confined to the prisons, they would not be able to vote in the elections. Where do we have it? We have it in the Representations of the People's Act of 1951. We have one of the important sections under this law, that is section 62, which says right to vote. 62 of 5 says no person shall vote at any election if is confined in a prison, whether under a sentence of imprisonment or transportation or otherwise, or is in the lawful custody of the police, provided that nothing in the subsection shall apply to a person subjected to preventive detention under any law for the time being in force. What do we mean by it? In case there are people, it can be the under trials, it can be the people who are convicted. If they are confined to the prisons, they would not be able to vote in the elections. So this elections can be the general elections where people like you and me go and vote, or it can also be presidential elections, it can also be vice president elections, or it can be the legislative assembly elections, or any elections whatsoever. So if a person is in the prison, he would not be allowed to come out and vote in the elections. This is where the author brings into picture one of the concerns. What does the author say? The author says that if a person is given a bail, what is a bail? This person would be temporarily allowed to go out. He is not convicted, yet he is not proved of that particular charge. So if a person is given the bail, in that particular case, he would be entitled to cast his vote. So what is the issue here? The author goes on to say that this is violating Article 14 of the Indian Constitution. How is it violating Article 14? Article 14 gives us a particular parameter which also says that two groups can also be treated unequally. How can they be treated unequally? This can be taken up to meet the objective. What is the objective here? The objective here is to prevent the criminals from casting their vote. This is where the author says we have an issue. What is the issue? We have number of under trials who are also present in the prison. We also have the convicted who are present in the prison. Then we also have people who've got bail who are not in the prison. If you are allowing people who are out on bail to cast their vote, what about the under trials? The idea is that every single person, whether he is convicted or not, if he's done some criminal activity, such person should be prevented. But if you are giving the bail people to cast a vote and not the under trials, it is violating Article 14, says the author. So the author goes on to say, irrespective of whether he is convicted or not, if he is under trial or not, whether he is being given bail or not, all these people should be weighed on a same scale and they should not be allowed to vote, says the author. This is where the author also brings into picture some of the models that is practiced at the international level. The author takes into picture the UK model. In the UK, for instance, only convicts sentenced to prison for 4 years or more cannot vote. In Germany, only persons convicted of certain political offences are disenfranchised. In Canada, where the law formally restricted all prisoners from voting, constitutional courts intervened and struck it down for being arbitrary and disproportionate. So what we have is multiple other models. If the legislature intend to, they can look into one of these models and ultimately correct the errors as well. So the major issue that the author points out is that if there are people who were in prison, now given the bail by the court of law, if these people are allowed to vote, then what about the under trials? They are not convicted. If they are convicted, we are already confining them to the prison of law. But there are under trials. These people are not convicted. But if you are allowing the bail people to go on vote and not the under trials, it is violating Article 14. And if it is violating Article 14, this has to be looked into by the legislature and the court of law, says the author. So the author says going forward, the legislature will have to bring some of the changes to this particular legislation and it has to make these words clear, and the confined word will also have to include bail people, or it should not allow the criminals to cast their vote, whether it is the MLAs, MP or any section of the people, is what is this article all about. Now let's look into the mains practice question. Examine China's expanding geopolitical presence in Africa and highlight how Indian and Chinese involvement in Africa differs in intent, methods and outcomes. Next question. Instead of expanding contractual employment, the government should seek to bolster public services. Substantiate. Please write all your answers on the comment section, peer review, and to give positive feedback to your friends' answers. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.